What's up everyone, Dan Palacios of Kinetic Training here, and today we're starting episode 1 of an ongoing series called Objectify Your Pain. Objectify Your Pain is a course in tools, strategies, skills, and techniques that we can give you to manage pain, eliminate pain, and ideally understand it from a more objective perspective. I like to approach this from a really integrated model, so using various types of techniques like foam rolling and myofascial release, self-massage, breathing techniques, meditation techniques, stretching, mobility, movement, strength training as well, and of course nutritional strategies to do so. As a holistic view of understanding health and redefining health, we want to make sure that we're using as many tools as we can to help an individual or ourselves get to a place where they have an anchoring system and they have some kind of strategy to approach any given pain. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to ignore professional help in any way, but we do want to better understand our own pain mechanisms and potentially some of the emotional and psychological factors that come along with it. What are the external stressors that get us to a place where our body has become so biomechanically wound up that we begin to feel pain as a result of it? Now, is that a catastrophic injury, or has that been a chronically developing pain as a result of poor movement patterns? The list goes on and on as far as how we can get to that place of pain, but Objectify Your Pain is all about giving you the necessary tools to better understand that and see which way to go from there. So the first product we're going to cover today is the Resync product line, which is actually two different products, the collagen and nitric oxide blend as well as the recovery blend. Now, what's important about these products is that they work together as a team to help bring our body into the prime state internally from a nutritional perspective to reduce inflammation, increase pliability and motility of the muscle fibers and of the soft tissues, and allow the body to recover properly. The nitric oxide is going to introduce more oxygen into our system, which is going to allow for better delivery of the collagen complex through a combination of really well-balanced ingredients that are all natural, including vitamin C, as well as a slew of other great ingredients for tissue recovery. The anti-inflammatory blend covers a wide variety of products like the red spinach extract, leaf extract, beetroot, inulin, turmeric. You can go through all of the different ingredient lists, and there's plenty of educational material on the Resync product line website to show you why you should be taking that before and after every workout, as well as on a daily basis to maintain your normal tissue quality on an internal perspective. Now, the next product we're going to cover is the breath belt. So the breath belt is a 360-degree torso belt. It's all elastic resistance here, so you can see it's a double-banded system. I've actually got the ability to slide 2 foam balls into the slots there, which will actually press directly into the psoas, help to lengthen the tissues, and give the body the ability to create resistance against the diaphragm. And then, of course, most people are pretty familiar with foam rolling, and this is the Rolga foam roller. So the Rolga foam roller is a simple foam rolling design that just allows for divots throughout the entire structure so you can get into some of those tighter areas of the body. So this right here is the breath belt. It's a double-banded elastic system. We're going to strap the breath belt around the lower part of our abdomen, really into just above our pubic bone and just above the sacral bone, where the straps are going to allow us to dig these 2 foam balls. You see here, these are the Rolga activator balls, but basically what's going to be happening here is that these are going to be pressing into my psoas. That's just about an inch below my belly button on either side. With that dual banded system, the balls are going to be applying pressure to the psoas while I'm breathing in. So the mechanisms at work here are essentially pressure. We want to have as much pressure as myself, the individual, can stand, because that's going to allow me to start to learn to cope with the amount of pressure being applied. The body, the central nervous system, is a tactile learner. We go through our various senses, right? Sight, taste, touch, smell. In this case, touch, teaching the body to cope with that and the amount of pressure being applied. So I'm going to strap the breath belt around myself so that it can apply
pressure into my psoas. There's one band. I'm going to resist, and that's going to allow me to right away begin to feel that pressure in the psoas and the abdomen. Now, what we want to be sure of here is breathing diaphragmatically and belly breathing. So as I breathe in through my nose, I'm pushing out against the breath belt, and then as I breathe out through my nose, I'm resisting. We liken this to the same sensation as if you were laying down on the ground and one of your kids or a niece or nephew or someone was trying to jump on your stomach. What would you have to do in order to resist the amount of pressure being applied there? And what that's going to begin to do is lengthen the tissues throughout the torso, especially the psoas, the seated musculature that's getting pressure applied from the torso, right? The hips are in a shortened position, the hamstrings are in a shortened position. This is essentially allowing me to stay in a hip extension position from the lumbar spine all the way around 360 degrees of haptic feedback, giving me constant pressure throughout. Now, what's great about this from a coaching perspective is that this is essentially as if I was sitting here holding my athlete all the way around and saying, this is what you do, this is how you do it, right? Just either tapping or applying pressure, but this allows the athlete or the client to move freely, and it's really just setting them up for success, making their hip hinge that much more effective, especially for athletics, especially for people who are experiencing any kind of back pain. Their lower back is so hyperactivated, they're usually hamstring drivers of some sort, so this is helping them to activate their glutes as quickly as possible. I like to leave the breath belt on for the first time a client is using it without the balls applied in there because it can be a lot for some people to handle in the beginning, but this is a great way to help lengthen those torso tissues and start to relieve some of that pressure throughout the entire lower back and teach someone to cope with the amount of pressure being applied in a really controlled environment where they don't necessarily have to be getting their heart rate up. They just have to feel that pressure, learn to breathe through it, resist against it, and get what they need. This is made for anyone who's got a torso, anyone who needs to be stronger. This is the breath belt and what it does, something that anyone should be using. All right, so let's talk foam rolling. If we're thinking about this in the context and continuum of a workout, typically what's going to happen is I'm going to take my Resync products, collagen and nitric oxide blend about an hour before the workout, just to let that hit my system, make sure that the blood flow is going, that my capillaries are in fact increasing in size, that nitric oxide is flooding my system, more oxygen is coming into my system. Then I'm going to focus on my breathing drills, utilizing the breath belt to help lengthen the tissues around my torso, decompress the tissues around my spine, and really focus on nasal breathing so that I'm actively oxygenating that blood and increasing my diaphragmatic control. And then prior to the workout and post-workout, I would be foam rolling. In this case, using the Rolga foam roller, which has the various zones and the different divots to allow the foam roller to really get into those tight, soft tissue areas that are typically harder to reach with a traditional style foam roller. It's pretty small, pretty simple. This is the harder version. I do recommend that most people start with a softer foam roller because it really has a lot to do with your own personal level of pain response and discomfort response. Typically what we're looking for is around a 5 or 6 or 7 on the discomfort scale. We don't want to start generating so much pain and discomfort that the person or the client or yourself begins to actually guard and wince against the force of their body pressing into the foam roller. This is self-myofascial release, and part of what we're trying to do is create a positive association, somewhat, I don't want to say pleasurable experience necessarily, but certainly a controlled discomfort response that can be progressed over time to the point where I, for instance, use harder metal objects and very narrow pointed objects to get into certain areas to help actually generate quite a bit of relief. Now, a lot of people's general understanding of foam rolling is that it is basically pushing into a knotted up muscle and then sort of tenderizing it like a meat tenderizer. And I'm certain that there's some level of that going on, but really there are certain mechanisms involved that have a lot more to do with your central nervous system's touch response and stimulus response.
when there's a quote-unquote trigger point, we press into that muscle, that knot, and that trigger essentially is your body's ouch response. It's somewhat of a flinch, or it's at least some level of a guarding that's going on. So to some extent, injury or stress or chronic knotting up of those tissues is coming from a triggered response to various external stimulus, or too much pressure or too much force being applied to the muscles, which causes tearing and knotting and guarding of all kinds. So what we're trying to do is create a positive experience in the muscular structures, in the psychological aspects and the emotional aspects of foam rolling. And a great way to start with that is to just allow the roller to rest between your shoulder blades and allow the body to pretty much just relax into it. A lot of people like to try and start in some of the more tight and tender areas of the body, but I really think that as a progressional mindset, as a coach, it's best to introduce people to these things slowly, especially if they're doing it for the first time, so that they can experience the full benefit of progressing without having to work through too much of that initial pain and discomfort that can come from rolling tighter areas like the piriformis or the IT bands or even the lats, getting up under that armpit where those areas can be really, really trigger pointed. So what we're going to do here as a drill is I've got my fingers interlaced and interlocked here. I'm going to let my head just rest into my hands, just cradling my head so that my neck flexors and extensors can really just relax. And part of what that's doing is stretching out my triceps, my lats, and my serratus, but it's also creating some pretty good pressure into my rhomboids against those two divots of the Rolga foam roller. And as I do that, I'm going to take a deep breath in through the nose, belly breathe, expand that diaphragm, and as I breathe out, I'm going to lift my hips, and again, continue to let my head cradle into my hands, which is also allowing my cervical extensors, the muscles on the backside of my neck, to relax and help decompress some of that tight, compressed tissue and those tight, compressed cervical discs, and relieve some of the pressure on my vagus nerve. And really, a lot of what we're doing here, again, is creating the opportunity for the central nervous system to relax and to stimulate certain areas throughout the central nervous system to elicit a response. In this case, we're hitting the muscles between the shoulder blades, just along the spine, the spinal extensors, the shoulder blade retractors, to elicit more of a shoulder blade retraction response and a thoracic extension response, as well as the cervical muscles to do the same. Most people spend way too much time in a chair sitting like this, so their torso is all compressed and tight and their spine has all that weight to carry, and then their neck is getting a lot of pull on the posterior side because their head is sitting forward. So what's happening is we're using this technique and the breathing techniques to relax the system, pull the body out of fight or flight mode, and put the body into more of an extensor response, which is a much more objective biomechanical state, allows us a lot more options, as opposed to the flexor response or the fight or flight response that puts us in this really tightened state, and we condition ourselves to stay in a more open, more extensor response rather than that flexor response. So that's part of what we're trying to achieve. Now there's several different ways that you can actually foam roll. You can foam roll longitudinally down the long portions of the muscle, and you can actually cross fiber or knead or apply pressure directly into a spot and hold on to it. Those are all different techniques that you can apply, but more importantly, you want to make sure that it's not an extremely painful response to that pressure application. Your body is essentially a big pressure sensor computer, so every time you receive any kind of touch response, it's going to respond accordingly. So you have to be sensitive to that and understand that if you apply too much, you're going to just exacerbate the guarding response. So pre-workout, post-workout foam rolling, 5 to 10 minutes of each to induce what we call the relaxation or the removal of the fight or flight response. There's great science to support what massage does to not only knead out those muscles, but actually induce somewhat of an immunoresponse in the muscles that causes certain areas of your DNA to actually reduce inflammation and increase muscle synthesis or protein synthesis. So there's a lot of great information out there. I've got the Rolga foam roller, the Resync product line, and the breath belt all on the Kinetic Training store. I'm going to put linkage in the description so you can go ahead and check those out. Make sure to stay tuned for the next episode of Objectify Your Pain. I'll see you next time. Live kinetically.